this video, we're going to add in high scores. So when we finish the game, we're going to check to see if we've had a new high score, and then we will just be able to display a list of however many high scores you want. We'll allow people to put in names or 3 initials like the old school one or something like that. So you can kind of make it the style that you want to. So right now I'm in the start menu, but let's go ahead into the main menu here for now. So let's make sure that we have everything saved. All right. So one of the easiest ways to save high scores is to use what's called PlayerPrefs. So PlayerPrefs is a way for us to store data on the local hard drive of the machine. So this isn't going to store it for all people who ever played the game. If you wanted to do something like that, you would have to go into a web-based application, which we're not going to do in this one here. But we're going to use something called PlayerPrefs. Now, PlayerPrefs are a bit limited in that we can only store certain types of data, and that is we can store strings, we can store integers, and floats. So if we want to have several high score positions, we're actually going to have to store several different PlayerPrefs. Okay, we can't store an array or a list using PlayerPrefs at this point. So in the game manager, we're going to want to be able to load at the beginning of the game whatever high score information we have, and then we're going at the end of the game going to want to check to see if we have a new high score somewhere in that list of high scores, and then basically resave all that information back out to our PlayerPrefs. So it's going to be kind of several spots. If we just want to keep one spot, that's pretty easy. So we'll start by showing you how to do one spot, and then we'll look at how to actually change that into top 10 or however many spots that you want to keep. Alright, so what we're going to need to do is store that information and then get that information back. Alright, so we're going to need to have a function here that we can call when the game is over. So currently, when the game is over, we go back to our spaceship script. We're canceling invoke, we're setting our game over panel to active so that we can see it, and then that's all we're doing. And then that panel has some buttons to press. So what we're going to want to do is actually add another piece in here. So if the game over, we'll go ahead and set the game over panel to true, but we're going to want to check to see if we have a new high score. So we're going to want to tell the game manager that the game's over and have the game manager check for a high score for us. So that means we're going to need the player here, since this is all in the Starship Controls one, to be able to talk to our game manager. So let's go to the top of our script up here, and let's make a link to our game manager. So we'll just stick it right in here somewhere, public, and then we're just going to go ahead and get the game manager script. So we'll say game manager, and we'll just call it GM. Okay, and let's actually make that lowercase gm. There we go. So this is my game manager, and we'll assign that out in the inspector. So then what I can do down here is I can tell game manager to run a function. So when the game is over, let's tell the game manager to check for high scores. Alright, so, and we'll have to write this function here, but let's just say gm dot, and then we'll make a function called check for high score. And then we're going to have to send the game manager the score that our player currently has. So if we check our variables here again, we'll see that we have one called score here that's keeping track of our points that we've scored. So let's go, we'll just copy that variable name, we'll go back down here, and we're going to send score to our game manager. Okay, so this is turning pink here because we don't have a check for high score function yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this so I don't make a spelling mistake. And then I'm going to go to my game manager script and I'm going to go ahead and make a new function in here. So let's just put it down here at the bottom. It's going to need to be, well, it doesn't need to be public. Yes, we're going to need to make it public. And we're going to paste in that name. For now, we'll make this void because we're just going to do one, but later we're going to want to actually have this return some information. It's going to be taking in an integer because score is an integer, and we'll call this score. And then what we're going to need to do is compare score against whatever our high score is. So we're going to just make a temporary integer variable here called current high score. And we're going to set that equal to whatever we have stored out in our PlayerPrefs. So we're going to say PlayerPrefs right here. And then we're going to, PlayerPrefs, not PlayerPrefs exception, PlayerPrefs dot. And then we're going to want to get an integer variable here. So we're going to go down to where it says get int, and this is going to return a value corresponding to the key that we asked for. Okay, so we need a key that's going to be a string. So we get to define what these different things are stored under on the disk. So we're going to say get int, and now I have to give it a key as a string. So strings always go in quotes. So the key, let's just call this high score. We'll just do high score like that. That will return to me the number that's currently stored. Now, if there is not currently one out here called high score, then it's going to probably just return me a 0. So let's check this out and see what happens, because the first time you run this game, there won't be a high score. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a check here. We're going to check to see if the current score is greater than the stored high score. Okay, then so we're going to say if score is greater than, and you know what, I don't like this number or this name here because it's kind of confusing. So let's just call it high score. That makes more sense. So if the high score that we have, so we'll say if score is greater than high score, then we will do something here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to need to update some text on that Gameover panel that we're popping up. So that currently is being handled by my spaceship controller script. So we do actually want to return something to our script. So if you want a function to return a value to what called it, you change this void to the type of value that you're going to send back. So for now, let's have this send back a bool. So we're going to send a true false back to it. So if our score is greater than a high score, then we'll return, and what we want to return is a value, and we're going to return a true. So this will actually return a Boolean value of true to what called it. If the score was not greater than high score, then we'll just say return false. So as soon as it hits a return statement, it stops running this code. So if it returns true, it'll stop right here and it will never go to this line. If though it doesn't, if this check doesn't pass and it doesn't return the true, then it will return the false and it will stop running this code here. So now we're doing something kind of new we haven't done in this project. We're having a function actually return a value to what called it. So let's save this. Let's go back into our spaceship controls because we have to change something here now. So you'll notice if I hover over high score, it says it's a public bool check for high score. That means that it's going to return a Boolean here. So this whole call to this function is going to become whatever value gets sent back, a true or a false. So we need to check for this. So We're going to put this in an if statement here now. So we're going to say if, check for high score and send the current score. That's going to come back either true or false now because we're returning a Boolean. So if it's true, if this comes back true, then we know we have a new high score. We want to take some action. So the action is going to be to change to give an opportunity for the person who made the high score to put in their information. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to pop up perhaps a different panel here or a different box on our panel that's going to allow them to get their high score. Alright, so let's see how we're going to do that out here in Unity. We're going to have to add a little to our UI. So right now we have this game over panel that's just popping up automatically. But if we have a new high score, before we go to game over, we actually want to give them an opportunity to have their high score entered into the game. So let's actually go into our canvas here and let's add another panel to our canvas so that we can actually enter in our high score. So let's go UI panel. Let's call this panel our new high score panel. This is only going to pop up if we have a new high score, and let's make it so that it's not stretching across the screen. So let's go ahead and set that to the center, and let's go ahead and move this a little bit smaller. And maybe to make things a little less confusing, let's go back to our Game Over panel and just disable it so it's out of our view. Okay, so our new high score panel, let's just make that roughly the same size as our other one, or we might not need as much space. We could do something like this, and then maybe we'll anchor it to the top center instead. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so in here we're going to want to give them a message saying, hey, congratulations, you made a new high score. So let's add a text to our panel, and we'll call this our congratulations text. And then we'll make this text box a little bigger. Let's make it maybe something like so, 400 by 500, and we might just slide it up a bit towards the top of our panel here. And we'll change our text to say congratulations. Congratulations. And let's get that text size a little bigger so we can see what we're working with. So we'll try maybe a 40. 40 looks good. Remember, you can always click into your game window, Shift and spacebar to get in the full screen so you can see what that looks like. So that's looking pretty good as far as size. Shift spacebar to go back, of course. Let's get some text. Let's get some, let's see, let's change that text to a different color, maybe kind of a bright green, kind of like we've been using for our score here. And then let's make this 2 lines perhaps. So let's hit enter to go to new line here, because you can do multi-line in here. And then you can say new high score. Now you notice it didn't show up out here. That's because the box doesn't have enough room for that. So if I go drag this box a little bit lower, then it pops out. So we can just kind of pop it out like that. We can also tell it right here for vertical overflow, go ahead and let it overflow vertically, and we can let it overflow horizontally as well. That way, if for some reason this game gets played on a screen that's got a really small resolution, it should still pop it out there. Let's also center this, and we'll leave it to the top of the box. That's fine. So congratulations, new high score is going to be our text. Alright, so let's make a little bit more room here in our panel. So let's just kind of drag that down a bit. So you notice as I was dragging it how it actually is trying to keep that close to the center. That's because of those anchor points. So let's take it back kind of to where it was before. Let's change the text box anchor point from center to top center. So now it's going to stay there. So if I go back to my panel here and I grab it, now you notice that it stays at the top. So that's just a good example of what the anchor points do. Alright, now let's make another UI element in our new high score panel, UI, and this time what I want is an input field. We're going to allow them to input some initials or a name or whatever you want to do. Okay, so we've got an input field here, and in the input field you've got a couple of chunks here. You've got a placeholder, which is the text that is sitting in here waiting for you to type something. So this says enter text there, and then you have the actual text itself that has been typed in. Okay, so I'm going to go to the placeholder. Instead of saying enter text, we'll say enter name, so that it's like that. And again, we can change the font and the size and all that. Let's go ahead and look at this in full screen and see. So you notice that this is a little bit hard to read. It's kind of washing in with the back here. So what we need to do is probably maybe make this a little bit bigger and bolder. So let's go back in and look here on my input text field. Let's go ahead and drag that maybe a little bit bigger and wider. We'll just make it nice and big and bold. And again, to center this out, just change the X position to 0. And then in the placeholder text, we can also center that in the middle. In the middle like that, we can change its font size to maybe something like a 25 or a 30. And we can change its color here if we want to as well. Maybe we'll leave it kind of the gray color for now. But we have it to where we can say enter name. And then what happens is when they type into this box, it's going to get captured in this text. So what we need to do is in our script, we need to be able to capture this when they are done typing. So on the input field itself, you've got an input field script that you can kind of change here. And what we want to do is set up a few things here. So we can give it a character limit, like how many characters that they can type into here. We can also say content type. We can say standard, which lets them type in anything. We can let them just make it alphanumeric, just a name, an email address, whatever. We can kind of set these up. I think we'll just leave it standard so they can type in whenever they want. Line type, single line is fine. We're not going to let them type in that much. And the character limit, so we could set this to 3 if we just wanted to do the standard 3 initials in here. Or if we wanted to do more, if we put 0, I believe that lets them put in as many as they want. Let's go ahead and type in 3 here though for now. So it's 3 characters are what they'll be able to type in. And let's go to the text area here. Let's change that also to this let's see, what do we put in placeholder? We put 30. Let's go ahead and put for text here. Let's go ahead and put 30 for that. So that when they type it in, they'll see it. Let's go ahead and center that text. And then let's change the color here to maybe some sort of a yellow for now as they're entering it in. And then when they type in there, that's what it should look like. Okay? So this is a new kind of a UI element, an input field. Okay, now the other thing we want to do is figure out what to do when it's done. So we have on end edit string, or we have on value changed string. So we can have this automatically run when they're done. So if I hit this on end edit string, I can tell it a function to go when they're done editing. Alright, so we will play with this a little bit and see what we get. But the main thing is once they type this in, so matter of fact here, let's hit play. Okay, so it's here. I can click into this and I can start typing things in. Now that really does not show up well with that white background and the yellow text here. So let's actually go to our input field. Let's go to our color and let's turn it to black. So let's make this input field black because it's on this white screen here. And then on our placeholder text, let's go ahead and change the color of that text to something like, you know, red or whatever so we can see it. And then let's see how that looks. So I know this is going to look weird because we have our game playing in the background. so we can just test this out. So if I click into it and enter initials like that, there we go. That shows up real well. Now if I try to type more than 3 characters like I am right now, it won't let me do it. So if you want to restrict them to 3 characters, you would just do something like that. Alright, so that is working. And so we have our ability to type the text in here. Let's get this screen appearing and disappearing at the right times here now, so it's not just always on our screen. So we're going to go ahead and collapse all this down for now. Let's take our new high score panel and just turn it off so it's not active at the beginning of the game, and then we'll go in and we'll let our spaceship controls adjust that. So in our spaceship script here, let's also now make a link to this new panel that we just made. So let's see where we were doing that. Okay, here's our Gameover panel. And let's go ahead and make this a public game object. And we'll call this our new high score panel. Let's go back out into Unity here. Let's make sure we've linked things in. So let's go to our spaceship that has that script, and we've got our new high score panel. So let's grab new high score panel and drag it to there. And then we also want to load in our game manager. So let's grab the game manager and drop him in here to the GM spot. There we go. So that's all hooked up. We'll go back into our script. So now that we have that connection made, we'll go back down here for we are checking for our high score. And if it is a high score that's new, then we want to turn that new high score panel on. So we'll say new high score panel dot SetActive true, and that will make that visible. Okay, so if you have a new high score, we'll set that to true, and then let's just see what happens here if we actually run this. Make sure I saved my script. There we go. And let's just try to score a few points here and then just see what we have working for now. Alright, so I'm going to let the alien kill me here. I've got 45 points. Okay, so you notice we got the game over panel as well, so we're going to have to make sure that doesn't turn on, but it says congratulations, new high score. So that's because it pulled up the old, it pulled up a high score, and if it doesn't find one, it just sets it to a 0. So the first time you run this, it's just going to pop up, and that's what we were testing. Okay, so a little bit more to do here. So it did find that to be true, and it popped my thing up. So we want to move this command now that sets the game panel active. We want to move that, so I'm going to cut that out of there for now. We only want to set that up if once this is done. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is have another function run after a new high score has been set. But for now, let's do an else here. And for the else, we'll go ahead and we'll drop in the game over panel active true. So if we didn't have a brand new high score, then we'll just go ahead and turn on the game over panel, and we won't turn on the high score panel. Okay? If the high score panel does get turned on, then when its input field is done and they finish editing that input field, then we want to have a function that's going to capture that so that we can then turn that game over, the new high score panel back off, and then maybe turn the game over panel back on and have a button to display high scores, or maybe we'll just have high scores display all the time at the end of a game. We'll see how we decide to do that. Alright, so let's make a new function here. We'll call this public void high score input, And what we want high score input to do is to get the input from the text box out there, that input text field, and to store it into a temporary variable here that we can then store as our new high score. Alright, so we're going to need a link to that input text box. So let's make another variable up here at the top. So let's just keep this all kind of right together here. It's going to be a public input field, public input field, and we'll just call this high score input. It's going to be our high score input field here, and then we can save that. Let's go out into Unity. Let's go to our spaceship, and let's see, here it is right here, high score input. So let's grab our input field and drag it into there. So now we have our input field linked in, and we can get from the input the text right here that's going to this value. Okay, so and the text will be right here. Okay, that's what we're going to get. So when we go out here now, let's go back down to our function that we were writing, our high score input. We can now make a temporary string variable. Let's call it new input. We can set it equal to high score input, the variable that we just said, dot text. That's going to give me the current value of the input field. That's what we want. So this is going to allow us to capture that. All right, and then let's just, to see this working, let's do a debug debug.log, and let's just print out the new input. So we can just actually see if this is getting passed along. So if we get a new high score and we type the information, and when we're done, we're going to tell the input field to run this function, and then it will capture the high score inputs text into here, and then we'll debug it out. So let's go out into Unity here. Okay, so out in Unity here now, let's go to our input field. Now on end edit, we're going to the spaceship. So we're going to drag the spaceship in here. We're going to go here to the function. We're going to go to spaceship controls, and then we're going to go to high score input as our function. And then let's test this out. Let's get a few points. Alright, and then let's move up here and let's crash into something. Okay, so we got a new high score, so let's type in our name. Let's call it Pro, and when I hit enter after doing Pro, you notice it printed it out, so it got it. So if I type in something like this and I click off, it goes. So I can either click off of it or I can hit enter, and it will take in the input. Okay, so we have that all set up. So we are capturing the input now, and we're able to print it out. Okay, so now we've captured the name. So the next thing we need to do is actually store the new name and the score into our PlayerPrefs. Now that we're capturing the input here, we want to close down the new high score panel. We want to turn that back off after that's done. So let's just copy this line right here, and we'll set active to false on the panel, and that will make the panel turn off. And then at that point, we'll go ahead and turn on our Gameover panel. So let's copy this line and we'll paste that in. Alright, so now when the game is over, if we have a new high score, we'll turn on that high score panel. If not, we'll just go to the Gameover panel. But if we got the high score panel, then when we're done editing the input field and the player pushes enter or clicks away from the input field, it will launch our high score input function, which will close our high score panel and open our game over panel. And then all we have to do is store the information here for our new high score, and then show that to the screen. So let's save this. Okay, back in Unity, we'll clear out our console, and let's just go ahead and shoot a few things here. Let's just see the panels working. Okay, let's run into one of these rocks here. Maybe. So our high score panel pops up. We can enter in our name and hit enter, and now our game over screen popped up. Okay, so that is working the way that we would expect it to. Now we just have to actually store the information and display our high score list to the screen. So back in our spaceship controls, so now that we know we have a new high score, we've gotten the name that they've inputted, let's actually store that. So we can just write that to the disk right here. So we can say PlayerPrefs, and then what we want to say this time is we want to actually set a value. So we're going to say set string, and we're going to set string, and we have to give it a key as a string. So we're going to call this high score name, and we would put a comma, and then we're going to give it the value. The value we want is our new input that we had right here. So that will actually write to our disk under the key high score name our new name that we just typed in. We also want to record the high score itself, so we'll also do a PlayerPrefs dot, and this time we're going to set an int, so an integer. Same thing, we have to give it a key as a string, so we'll call this high score. So we should check to see what we did. We did that here in our game manager. We had our game manager check that. So in the game manager, if you remember, we were checking for high score all lowercase. That's the key name that we're looking for. So high score all lowercase. So right here, high score. And then the value we want to set it to is our current score. Alright, so now we're actually saving the information. We've got the name and the high score saved there. Then the last thing to do then would be to display that information. So we could either open up yet another panel that shows the high score, or we could make a high score button that would open up our high score as well. So we've got a couple of options here. Let's just save what we have so far. So out here in Unity then, let's turn on our Gameover panel, because currently that's what we have popping up. So we would have some room in here to either display a high score list. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do a little moving around here. Let's move this game over up to the top here a little bit more, and make sure that it's in the center. And then let's move our buttons around a bit. So let's put maybe our menu button over here, and our play again button maybe somewhere underneath here like this, and then maybe we'll put some high scores over here. So we can either do this in yet another little panel, or we could just add some text here. So let's do this. Let's add some text, and so to our Gameover panel, let's add another text, and we'll call this our high score text, or a high score list maybe. Okay, and let's put this much taller. So let's give it some room. Let's move it over here to the side of the screen. Let's make it wider. So we're going to give it quite a bit of space here to display. And then for our text, let's put like some placeholder text in here. So let's put like maybe 3 digits, and then our score. Or maybe we'll do our score and then our digits. So we'll put score and then our name just for some placeholder text. Let's go ahead and make this bigger. Maybe 40-point font works okay there. And we want to make sure that we are putting it to the top and to the side like we're doing there. And let's change the color so we can see it. We'll do some sort of a blue here for now and just kind of see how that looks. And then we might even want to put, you know, like first place. So we could right here do like first, or we'll put a 1, maybe a dash, and then, you know, we can figure out how we want to do this. Maybe the name and then the score here. So maybe they scored 10,000 points. Okay, now it'd be good to have a header on here. So the first thing we might do is put a header here, which would be high scores, something like that. And then we could list them all. We could break this up into a couple of boxes, but this kind of gives us a feel for what we might have. All right, maybe we should make that all caps. Something like that. Okay, so that's the idea. So we want to figure out how to do this in code. All right, and this is just placeholder text, so we can see if we have enough space. If we limit them to 3 digits, we'll have plenty of space here. All right, so let's take out the placeholder text and let's just leave the high scores there, like this. I'm going to leave a padded line in here, and we will save this. All right, so there's several ways that we could make this list of high scores show up, or our current high score. So what we'll do here then is every time we pop open, once we're done with our high score input, we'll go ahead and we'll update that text that's on our Gameover panel. Okay, so I've set Gameover panel active already, and so then what I'm just going to do is right away override the text. So we're going to need to have a link into the high score list text box here. So let's go put another variable up at the top here. So let's just add it into our stuff. So, and this is going to be string high score list. Oh, let's make that a lowercase h there. High score list text. Here we go. We'll save that. Let's go link that in the inspector here. So back to my spaceship. High score list is right here. And actually we don't want that to be a string. We actually want this to be a text. Sorry about that. So let's make that hold a text box. Okay. So we'll come back out here. Wait for it to update. Okay, none text. So let's grab that high score list text box and put it like that. And then what we're going to want to do down here is say high score list text dot text. So we're going to the text that's being displayed in that box. We'll set it equal to, and then let's go ahead and put that header in there. High score and then we're going to add to that text a empty line. So this is how you get it to go to the next line. That's like a carriage return, a new line. And let's do that twice. So we're going to put an empty line in there. And then let's go ahead and put in our high score name and our high score. And we can pull them right from our PlayerPrefs here if we want to, or we could just put new input and score here if we wanted to. But let's go ahead and pull it from the PlayerPrefs. So we'd say PlayerPrefs. We're saying go back out to the disk. Let's get a string. And the string that I want is my high score name. So that should get us what that high score name is. And then let's add in a padded space here. And then we can also say PlayerPrefs get int. And the int we want is our high score. Alright, so that'll put on that line the name and the score. Okay, so that should be what we want, and it should update. And we're doing this after we've already gone through and checked and updated all of our things here. And then if we didn't get a new high score, then we want to do this as well. So we kind of want to do this in two different places right now. We could write a function for this, but for now let's copy it. And then up here, if we didn't get a new high score, let's go ahead and just make sure that our high score box has got the right information in it, so we can also display it there. Okay, so let's go out here and let's turn off our Gameover panel. And let's just see what happens here. If I don't get a new high score, so I'm just going to let myself die. Let's just see what happens. You see, it didn't say anything here. Oh, I think I typed that in wrong. Sorry guys, it's actually slash that way. Let's try that again. Said high score, and just put a 0 and no text here. Okay, that's because both of these are empty. We have not had a high score before, so we may want to do some checks to see if we have those keys or if there's a value there. But if I hit play again and I actually get some points here, so let's make sure I can shoot some stuff. And let's go ahead and see if I can steer into one of these. Nope. Alright, so let's try to blow myself up here on something. There's a rock. Let's see if I can hit it. Okay. Now it says new high score because I scored some points. So I'll enter in a name here. And now you can see it says high score. Oh, and I didn't change it in the other one for new high score. So let's go change that line of text that I had messed up. Remember, the slashes go the other way. But you saw that it saved all that. Alright, we'll test it again. This time I'll try not to set a new high score. So I'll just try to crash into a rock here. And you see it says high score. This is the last one. Pro, 510 points. If I play again and try to get more than 510 points, alright, I've got 920 points up there. And now it says, hey, congratulations, new high score. Say this time it's Mac who did it. And you see now that it shows high score, Mac, 920. There you go. So it's remembering from game to game. It's writing it to the hard drive each time. And it's displaying and updating here on the screen. So if you want to do a list or keep like a top 5 or a top 10, I can show that to you next.